Okay, hello. Hi, everyone. This is Trudy with Fluxx. Thank you for joining me today in our training on styling. This training is an overview of the Styling tab. If you should have any questions at any time during the webinar, please type it in the questions section. Kevin will be moderating. We'll be dedicating the last few minutes for questions and answers. So let's get started. And first of all, we'll look at the Styling tab. So this is what we're going to cover in the agenda. What is detail style and how does it work with text blocks? What are the 3 preset styles for the compliance components? How do margin and padding settings affect fields? And how are the 2 functions different? How do a border and border radius affect the style? How do width and alignment change the objects on the page? How do you use color and color background? And if we have time, some extra things on spacings and headings. Okay. So to find the Styling tab, okay, let me just finish one else. The Styling tab is activated when an object is selected in Fluxx. Styling is available for text, fields, groups, spacers, or components, and is used for aesthetic reasons and practical reasons. Some of the practical reasons are you want an employee-only section. For instance, you have internal notes, and you want to call them out. You're sending back to the grantee, and you want them to notice the field that's grantee revisions required. You have instructions or directions, such as documents required. You want to call special attention to certain staff members. If there's like a rating section, you don't want to make sure they don't forget. You can put styling around that. And sections you want to call attention to, such as the financial section. Now, how do you find that? The Styling tab is in the admin panel, and anytime you have something activated, which makes it a light blue, you'll see the Styling tab is also activated. Okay, the first thing in the Styling tab is Detail Style. Detail Style is where you can put any of these headers on it, or you can use paragraph text, or the default style. Let me just show you what that looks like. Okay, here. If we're in the builder, let me just minimize this a little bit. You have a whole section of text and you want to make it all one at the same time, or you paste something in and you want to change the whole thing, you can do it this way. And there's an H1 setting, H2, H3, and you'll see the paragraph setting is very similar to well, it's similar usually to H4, but you see a little different here, and here's the default setting, which are pretty much paragraph settings. And H5, if you had something you wanted really small. So this is what the settings are like, and to do that, you just take a section of text. Swipe the whole thing. Okay, and you come over here, you save it. And then you come here, the Styling tab, and you change it, and it changes the whole setting of the whole section. So if I come back here, it's at H3, you can see that changed to the H4 setting. So it's an easy way to do it, and it's in one quick motion. Okay. So now let me just, what's nice is I put them all these in collapsible, so you can, let me just uncollapse those. All right. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about is preset styles. You have compliance components, such as the compliance document component, the compliance warning, and the compliance checklist. There are pre-built styles already for those, so you don't have to worry about styling them. And here are the three. You can also use this on something else. For instance, if you like this line, which is really nice, a nice simple border around something, you go here and apply that pre-built style, even though it's not a compliance warning or it's not a compliance document. So if you like one of these styles, such as the yellow or the white, the little pink is a little bit shocking, but here you can just add the style to anything you're working on. And you'd want to add it to your grouping. So this is the preset style that you can do. And again, that's the same thing. You go here, just go here to Builder, and you can just select it. If you have here, here's a document component. You can tell because it's pink. You come up here to Styling. Make sure you're selected in the group, and you can select a style. And the style is very easy to put on. It will not, if you end up setting styles down here, it will override the styles up here. So you just want to do one or the other. And if you look at it, see in the Builder, let me just look at it, preview. See what they look like. This is what the preset style looks like. A little later, I'll show you what these little lines are between them, because these are spacers with color added. So I've experimented with some spacers here. And actually that's where we're at next, which is spacers. We'll talk about the end how to do this, but here is where you can take a spacer and you can add color to it. You can add a border to it. I put in this one a horizontal rule. I put in a spacer inside of a group here, or three spacers together. But if you wanted to divide something, like I've divided this, you can do that by putting in a spacer and using color on it. And this is a simple one here. This is just horizontal rule at line 1, and that's just a spacing color right there. So this is spacers, and that's the very end. And let me just go to that. I'll go to that one at the very end, so let me just stay here. Okay, now the next thing was margins. And margins add pixels outside the imaginary boundaries surrounding the field content. Every field has sort of an imaginary boundary around it. And with margins, you're pushing that boundary to the left or to the right. And so if you look at here, you'll see that this is an example of one where I have it 100 pixels to the left and to the right. It's moved it over. This is 300 on the left side, pixels on the left, 300 on the right. This one has no margin at all, so you can see how this one it's kind of almost in the middle, and this one is a little to the left. And this has pixels added at the top and the bottom. So if you had a field that was being crowded, you could put a spacer in, or you could add, if you wanted to, margins at the top and the bottom, and that would add spacer to those. So this is kind of a nice way to do spacing. Or if you have a lot of fields and you want to just call attention to them, you can have one that's at the edge. You could have one in 50, and then 75, 100, 125. You could do something like that so they're staggered. So you could do something like that. And I have an example of that at the end where I've put colored text in, and I have it staggered. So you could, if you wanted, or if you did a rate such as ratings, if you had, say, the directions here, and then you wanted the rating to be indented or towards the center, you could use margins and have it go in whatever you wanted. If you're using alignment, it's going to go into the center, the left, or the right. There's no flexibility. If you use margins, you can adjust it to exactly how much you want it to go over. Okay, so that's your margins. Okay. And here you can see where I've taken this. Oops, let me go back here. And this one is at the border. This is 250. You can see it on a card. This is 300 and 350. And 300 is, well, almost in the center. So this is, you can see how that's been used. So it might be kind of effective, as I say, if you had something at the margin and something in, and then something at the margin and something in, if you wanted to make it easy, if you had a long section of questions. Now, in contrast, you have padding. And padding is adding pixels inside the imaginary boundary surrounding the field content. So padding is between the text and the edge of this imaginary boundary is the padding. And you almost have to use at least 5 pixels whenever you're putting in some color. I've noticed somewhere there's no color added, but if you're adding color, you have to have a minimum of 5, and that's really cutting it close. So most of the time you want to have 10 or 15 pixels. The one here to the right is the example of 15. So if you wanted it closer than that, you can have 10, but you can see how close it comes. And here's an example of where you have a border inside borders, and here these two. Now these would make it really stand out. So padding is something I use a lot, because if you're using any kind of styling at all, you really have to have padding in there. So here, you can see maybe a little better here. You can see here, this is just the minimum. This is probably 5 pixels. And here you have probably 10 pixels here and maybe 20 here. And here we have probably the equal amount on both of these. And here is just an example of it in color, where you're using colored text to stand it out, have it stand out. So if you're looking in the builder and looking at those, okay. So here is where you have. Just make sure margins, padding. Here you have 10 here, and this also has a border and a border radius on it. So here's the next one. This is the second from the bottom. Those are all 10. This is all 20. So the blue one has 20 around the whole thing. Okay. And this one right here is 20. Okay. So padding is, as I say, is really essential. Margins is very nice for distinguishing, from when you have a lot of text. And this we'll get to a little bit later. But these are really convenient. Okay, so go to the next one. Okay, so now this has to do with border. You can do a lot with border. Here is where, if you remember, the table of contents comes through pretty plain Jane. It just has your table of contents and your list under it. So here I've added a small border around it, just to sort of have it stand out, and it can be at the very top. Here is one where I've put a border within a border. So I have a section in here, inside the blue. I have the white inside the blue here. So the title, grant information, has one set of settings, and this whole section here has another set of settings. And here again, I've done some color on it so you can see it. Revisions needed here. So this would stand out for clients. Let me just. So if you had revisions needed, it would be very easy to see. And here's another example of where we have a border. We have a border inside here. We have a border around here, so there's a border inside a border. And so look at this one, which are my favorites here. Settings for documentation. Right. Okay, so we have 10, 10, 10. The border radius of 9. And notice I have a border inside a border. I have a gray selected for the outside. And then inside, I have another set of borders. And this one has a border, this one has padding of 10, and this one has padding of 2. And the difference between 10 and 2 is the size of the border. So if we look at this, right here, and look at the preview of it. You can see the border right there. It's probably a little confusing with all these things going back and forth. I have a PDF of this, so if anyone wants it afterwards, you can write to me or support, and it will be posted on the knowledge base. So you can go through and experiment on your own. So next thing is border radius. And this is the curve of the border. And this is done right here, border radius. So here you have a radius of 5, radius of 10, and a radius of 20. 10 is a really nice, modest one. If you want to be more dramatic, you can do something like 20. You get to a certain point where if you don't have enough padding, it'll actually cut off the letters. So you notice that all of this one at the bottom, I have quite a bit of padding because I know I'm going to have a radius of 20, and I don't want anything clipped in the corner. So that's the only thing you have to be careful about when you're doing border radius. And most of the ones I've done have a border radius on. If you look at this, you'll see this one does not, but this one definitely has a border radius. And none of these do. Let me just see if I've got any more examples of it. Okay, yes we don't. Okay. Up to that. That's the border radius. And then width. Width is another setting in admin. And width is, it takes the widest field, and it's how much of the real estate you're going to use on the card. So here I've made the width 250 pixels, which means the card imagines that the card is only 250 pixels wide. So all the fields are in that one section are squished over so that it'll fit in that. So you notice how small project description is? Because it's assuming the page is only this big, half the size. Here, the width is 350, which means the entire width of the card is imagining is 350. So this one comes over more. So you can see here that this is probably a third bigger than the other one. And you can see by the line, the difference in the line length. So in terms of applications, there might be a time when you want to use both width and margin, and you could have something maybe centered in the section. Might be kind of an effective thing to have it in the section, in the middle of the page. So if you use the margin and the width, you could do something like that. Alignment is pretty much what you do in any word processing program. Alignment takes and centers or makes to the left or right the field, content, or group object. Obviously, by default, it's left aligned. And here you can highlight, you can select something and change the alignment of everything. Now, it aligns everything within that group, but it doesn't affect the alignment of the actual text. So the text would be left aligned, but everything in it would be, the rest of it would be center. And so let me just show you an example, maybe a closer example of that. Here's a good example of terms. You can see the difference here. So here I have selected alignment, and you can see everything has been centered. And then here I have everything right aligned. If I were to type in it, it would be left aligned. But this is, and again, these are all used when there's a reason for them. In other words, is there an aesthetic reason to do this, or is there a practical reason? Do you have a lot of text and you want to have some variety? Do you want to do it for so people notice it, or that you want to change something for effect? Then you would do something like that. And then the last section is on color. And here you can see you can use text, color for text. Now that is selected here. So right here is your top one, says color. Color always refers to the text color. That's the top field. And here is your H1. And here's all the way down to paragraph. And you can see that I used the margins to make this go in. And this is where you could do something like that. And this pretty much gets you to the very end. And I can't remember what the setting is in that. I can look in a second. But the styling one, I think is, I don't know if I have an example. I don't have it here. But you can see how if you use it on a multi-select, it will do the fields within the multi-select, which is kind of nice. So if you really wanted this to show out tactics and methods, you could have all the fields would also be in that color. When we get all done, I'll sort of review everything and have look at the admin panel, but this is sort of the overview part of it. And then here's background color. Background color is what you use a lot because this is when you want to, obviously have color in the whole space. Here is one where I have the background color in payment and reporting requirements because we want it to stand out. Here's where you're using black around it and white text to have the document section stand out. And here is something where staff assessment, you would have it something like that. And if you use too much color, you're going to overwhelm the viewer or the user. So you want to really be careful and only use it where you need it. And sometimes it's effective to have color within a collapsible. But if you have a lot of color, and then pretty soon no one can see anything. So you have to really make sure that you're thinking about where is it really important that I use color and putting it in that section. This is a cool use of spacers. Now, spacing in general is really important because that's one. We'll have another webinar on styling in general about how to style your forms in the sense of spacing, headers, alignment, and say your portal pages, and using so the grantee has a very good first impression. But you can see how much space there is in this. So if you put a lot of space in it, you use dividers. This one has actually colored text in here, which picks up on the color in here. This is a little fun one I use for training, but you can see you can put an image if you want it on the line. It can go above or below the line. This is and you use lines like this. So you have a lot of options when you do it. And this is where this is your button for applying. But if there's obviously you can design your own little border in Photoshop and do it in. But if you want to do something really quick, here's just use your spacer. If I use a spacer and I show a horizontal rule, it's going to make this line right here. So if I wanted to divide a section and I just wanted to do something really fast or easy, and I would pick something like this. Now, if you just go here and let me show you how you do that. If you're on a spacer, this one is horizontal rule. So let me just go here. This is the spacer, and here's the spacer. So all I've done is I have a spacer. I've checked Show Horizontal Rule. I'm going over here to Styling, and I picked a color. It's really fast. Again, Show Horizontal Rule makes a really narrow line. If I uncheck it, it's twice the size. It's a fatter line. So if you wanted something fat and skinny, whatever, you could do it by unchecking and checking this. So you could make this any color you wanted. So an easy way to do that again is just to check the horizontal rule. Here is one where I have a horizontal rule and I have a border and I have padding of 10. Well, if I add padding around the spacer, we know it's going to be fatter. So we'll look at this again. So let me just look at that. One of our little secrets here, because this is a great way to do spacers and very easy. So here is just where you have just some color on it. This is the one I just showed you, one with a horizontal rule. This is one where you have a radius and padding. Here's padding. This one should be padding of 10. Okay, because that is padding. This, when you have padding in it, notice that if you have a horizontal rule and padding, it's going to make a line through the center, because that line is the horizontal rule. So you're basically putting in a spacer, you're putting in check horizontal rule to put in a line, and then you're adding padding. This shows you how the radius looks, the radius of 10. And here's where you have no radius at all and you're using several lines. But notice the horizontal rule is the white line in the center. If it's small enough, you won't even see that white line, although if you really zoomed in, you would. This one does not have horizontal rule checked. And without horizontal rule checked, and you just have color on it, it's going to be twice the size of this one. Okay. So that's these spacers. Okay, now, here. And the other thing, I think I have one more thing, if I put it in here. This is what we'll cover in another webinar, but just something to think about, which is when you're doing your headings, you have a lot of choices in your headings where you can use styling. In this heading, let me see if I can, I don't think I can zoom in. Let me see if I can go here. You can see here. Get this to move. All right, it's not going to let me. So here you can see I've used lowercase for the type here. This one I've used gray for a font color. This one has an actual line in color. Okay, so let me just go back here and get this. Just find my scroll bar here. At the bottom. And here, as I say, most people use upper and lowercase, but for variety, here's all caps. Here's where I've used center alignment. And you wouldn't have to use a graphic like this, but I'm saying you put a graphic here and then have your heading a little. So there's all kinds of styling options you can do where you're applying some of your styling tips, but you're applying them to headers. So let's go back here. And then we'll open it up to questions. So I'll just look here a second and see what you'd like me to go through and maybe do. So again, we've done what is detail style and how does it work with text blocks. It only works with text blocks, and that's where you can use H1, which is the largest, all the way down to real small, which is H5. The preset styles for compliance components are ones that are set up and you can just automatically apply them to them or to something else. Margin takes it in from the left or right, or top or bottom, and padding settings is something you use all the time, which adds padding around the field itself. Border and border radius, that's where you're putting an edge. If you have a color on it, you want to have a little edge that rounds it out. Width and alignment, again, width is where you're moving something forward or back, left or right. Alignment is where it's left, center, or right alignment. So this is on the page. Color is always text color, and color background is adding a color around the field. And usually you add a color background around groups. So just one other thing I want to mention. When you're adding color, you want to add color in a group setting. So if you're adding, so for project description, I want to add, so you should have your fields in a group and apply the color to the group object rather than the field itself. So that everything in that group, you move something in or out of that group, it automatically will be that color. You don't usually color things individually. You can, But in general, a most effective way to do that is put a field in a group and then add your color to the group. So let's look at questions here. Okay. Do you have any questions? Let's see. I'm not in the questions. Kevin?
I think we're good.
Okay, no one had any questions?
Not that I see.
All right. Okay, so if there are no questions, if you'd like, if you have any questions, you can let me give you my email. Okay. It's Trudy@fluxlabs.com, and this is a PDF that you could use as a reference if you want to, or it's just fun just to play around. It's a fun tab to have and be able to apply to groups or objects. Okay, well, I guess that's it for today. So I'll see you on another webinar. Goodbye.